The Bernie Madoff Story by Christina Valle. Who is Bernie Madoff? Bernie Madoff was born Bernard Lawrence Madoff on April 29, 1938 in Queens, New York. He is a stockbroker and investment advisor, and he actually created Bernie L. Madoff Investment Securities. He was charged with security fraud, investment advisor fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, false statements, perjury, making false filing with the SEC, and theft as an employee benefit plan in 2008. He is criminally charged and is currently serving 150 years imprisonment and forfeiture of $17.179 billion as of March 12, 2009. Bernie Madoff is a large contributor of the 2008 economic crash. He was a former non-executive chairman of NASDAQ stock market and admitted to operating a Ponzi scheme, which is considered one of the largest financial fraud in the history of the United States. He founded the Wall Street firm, which is his firm of the Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, in 1960, and was one of the chairmen until his arrest in 2008. He, in his business, he employed not only his brother, but his brother's daughter, his niece, and his brother was the senior managing director as well as a compliance officer who is also serving a sentence of 10 years in prison. Madoff was married, or is still currently married, and he had two sons. One was Andrew and the other one was Mark. And Mark committed to suicide 2 years to the day after Bernie was arrested. And his son Andrew died 2 years after that in 2014 from a rare form of lymphoma. His sons were the ones who contacted the FBI after their father confessed to both of them that he was involved in a Ponzi scheme. When his sons asked him what he meant by that, he went into detail and explained to him that the Ponzi has been going on for a very long time. Some say that Bernie says that it was started in the 1990s. However, some say that it goes back to 1970 of when he started manipulating investors. When his sons found out of the details of what was going on, they reported him. They contacted the FBI. By them contacting the FBI, helped them in the sense that they were not accomplices. They weren't involved, although some believed that, they may have been. They didn't want to be the target. It is important to note that with the whole scandal, the SEC was notified, which is the United States Security and Exchange Commission. They were investigating the Madoff investment securities multiple times, and they could never uncover the fraud that was going on. Bernie was really slick on communicating with them and trying to manipulate them to avoid them going through the necessary procedures to unravel what he was doing. When the SEC was contacted later on by another investment firm, because they started to unravel and try to make sense of the offers that Bernie was making to some of these investors, and Math started to not add up. It didn't match up to the numbers that people were seeing on, in the stock market. And so the SEC was contacted, um, and they still didn't do anything about it. They didn't feel that there was enough evidence to prove that Madoff was involved in some sort of a Ponzi scheme until the day of his arrest. Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 felony charges and admitted to his wealth um, by being involved in a massive Ponzi scheme. He defrauded thousands of investors out of billions and billions of dollars. In 2006, it appeared that the market was going really well. Houses were selling, people had jobs. There were really no issues to really be concerned about, when it came to the stock exchange. People were making money. Retirements were set up and were looking pretty good. And then in 2008, all of a sudden, the stock just started to plummet. Part of it plummeting, the reason for it plummeting was because of the issue with Bernie Madoff. The economic boom lasted about 25 years, and then obviously it started to slide in 2008. $2.4 trillion were lost in the stock market in part because of Bernie Madoff. And $65 billion in fabricated gains and funds were missing from the clients' accounts. And it was one of the largest Ponzi schemes. It wasn't the only one, but it was one of the largest. And then in 2010, you see that we're still trying to make our mark again. We're slowly seeing some growth. Obviously, we have issues. The employment rate is relatively low. And so people are starting to trust the system again. It's just taking some time. For Madoff himself, he it's not that he doesn't care about what happened. It's not his main priority. He understands that he did people wrong. He felt that he was making them money, and he still believes that. And you can hate him all you want, and he's able to kind of brush that off his shoulder. He says that the part that gets him the most is not seeing my family and knowing they hate me is the worst thing about being in prison. He said, I betrayed them. He just feels this enormous amount of guilt, and he's working with therapists and working at compartmentalizing, everything that's going on. He has better understanding of it, and he gets through his day. He converses with people there in prison. He has a therapist. He works. He doesn't make obviously nearly as much as what he was making, but he does work. He's had probably about 13 different roles in the prison system since he's been there. And he's making a life for himself in there. He says that I feel safer here than outside. I know I will die in prison, but I've lived the last 20 years of my life in fear. Now I have no fear because I am no longer in control of my own life. And these quotes were actually provided by an interview from Barbara Walters. She went into the prison to speak with him, wanted to get to know more about his situation and where his life is now. And although no video cameras and recording devices were allowed in there, she got some good insight on him, and it's from my understanding that he also no longer has contact with his wife. She had to make a decision, not an easy one, for them to part ways. She couldn't see him because Her sons at the time when they were living resented her because she still kept a relationship with their father. And she realized that he was no longer going to be a part of their lives, and she wanted to keep the boys a part of her life. So she had to make a decision. And they don't talk anymore. She lives her life, and he obviously lives his life in prison. And she is doing the best that she can to move forward with the decisions that he made for the both of them and their family. So some of you may know, I'm sure you all know what a Ponzi scheme is. It's one set of investors are paid unrealized returns out of money received from another. So the Ponzi scheme came about from a gentleman by the name of Charles or Carlo Ponzi, and he was a 1920s fraudster from Italy. And he came to America, and he was the guy. He was a charmer. They trusted him. He was friendly. He was very magnetic and persuasive. And so when you compare Carlo to Madoff, they knew what people wanted, and they found a way to satisfy them by just speaking, by body language, and people fell for it. And so you always have to be careful who you trust, how well you know them, and always do your research. Don't ever trust somebody as far as you can see them. Trust them as far as you can throw them. So in the Madoff, situation, he always told people that he had a 1% steady gains every month, 10 to 12 gain on a yearly basis, and he promised steady returns. And he produced statements every month or quarterly, and he made people believe that what they invested in was actually true. So nobody had reason to doubt it. The only people that had reason to doubt it is when other investments and other organizations or other businesses couldn't match what he was saying. And so that's when people started to question. People started to fully understand what he was actually doing. It was just a matter of time before people realized he was a fraud. So as I had mentioned before, in 2008, as everything started to decline in the stock market, there were several individuals that were involved in the decline. Obviously, these are not all of them, but for example, Richard Piccoli, he's charged with stealing $17 million. Nicholas Cosmo absconded from $130 million. Arthur Nadell stole over $300 million. Joseph Forte charged with operating a $50 million Ponzi scheme. Stephen Wash and Paul Greenwood defrauded investors over $554 million. And Alan Stanford charged by the SEC in conducting an $8 billion Ponzi scheme. So Madoff is not the only one, probably one of the largest or the largest. However, it's crazy to think that that there's several people out there that's doing this, and probably till this day there's people out there, they just haven't gotten caught yet. So just wanted to give you an overview of that this issue is larger than just Madoff. And so to conclude, Bernie Madoff, he pleaded guilty in 2009, as I had mentioned before, with 11 federal felonies. He admitted to turning his management business into a Ponzi scheme. And, he tells people that this started in the 1990s. Some people beg to differ. So this could be starting off as early as close to when he started his business, which is out of $5,000 from what he says was his lifeguard money at the time. However, other reports say that he got that $5,000 from his father-in-law. So it could have started as early as then. He will spend the rest of his life in prison, as he was sentenced to 150 years. He lost both of his sons. He lost his wife. He lost his grandchildren. He lost his friends. And at the end of the day, he feels okay with that. I mean, he doesn't have any other choice but to be okay with it. So thank you.